Hi, I'm Starre, and welcome to the Starre podcast. With over 20 years of experience, I've had the privilege of working with thousands worldwide and sharing my expertise across various media platforms. This podcast is your go-to resource for mastering manifestation and unlocking your ultimate magnetism. Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode, and let's dive in. And a very warm welcome back. Salarah here. As always, it is really beautiful to be with you, and I'm so grateful that you've chosen to spend your time with me today. Today's episode is another listener Q&A. I know this is quite popular with you. I've had a few messages to say how useful you have found these. And I've got a feeling today is going to be one of those episodes that you get something really rich from. And that's certainly my intention. So this particular question has been inspired by somebody that I work with. And I wanted to share it because although this particular question appears to be about relationships, it's actually about something much deeper. In fact, one of the hidden patterns that I see over and over again in my coaching practice is exactly this, especially when it comes to relationships. And so often we become consumed by the discomfort that we're experiencing on the surface of a challenge. So it might be that we focus on an argument that we've had, fearing an argument that we might have, or anxiety. It can also be the frustration. That's something that shows up time and time again. And the feeling of not being heard, the feeling of rejection, the feeling of not being seen. And of course, understandably, we want those uncomfortable feelings to go away. But what if those things aren't actually the problem in the first place? What if we're simply pointing, or what if they are simply pointing us towards something which is much deeper? And unless we look at the thing that is going on beneath the surface, we're going to continue to experience the effects of this until it's resolved. I guess the best way to explain it is imagine seeing a warning flashlight on the dashboard of your car. And instead of lifting up the bonnet to see what is going on, it's just so much easier and quicker just to cover the light with a piece of tape or a piece of fabric. The warning light doesn't disappear, but the warning light disappears, but the issue underneath it is still there. And I think many of us do exactly that emotionally. Of course, we don't know we're doing it, but that's exactly what we do. We spend our lives trying to manage these symptoms, these uncomfortable symptoms, without ever becoming curious about the hidden pattern that is creating them in the first place. And that's exactly why the same argument or same challenge keeps showing up over and over again. And it is frustrating. Those awful feelings, that discomfort, as the same feeling just keeps resurfacing time and time again. It might be different people, different set of circumstances, but some of the emotional experience feels very similar in your system. So for example, I was working with somebody the other week, and they very much thought that this particular issue was isolated to their relationship. But when we went into a little bit of curiosity, we discovered actually that this feeling had been a familiar feeling that had followed this person through all of their relationships and will continue to do so until it's resolved within his system. So let's just look at how this might look practically. Like, say one partner forgets to text to say that they might be running late. On the surface, that argument would seem like it's about that text message, but actually underneath it, one person is feeling forgotten, unimportant, perhaps even feeling abandoned in that moment. So there's something deeper going on, which the lack of text message has highlighted this deeper pattern. Or maybe your partner offers you some feedback about something that you've done. And on the surface, it's just simply a conversation. Yet inside your body, it just goes into this scrunched up, tense kind of defensive mode, because somewhere much deeper, the criticism or the perceived criticism has become entwined with your sense of enoughness and your sense of self-worth. So the lack of self-worth and enoughness on a deeper level is what the actual issue is. It's not the conversation that's being had in real time. Another practical example that I've had recently, perhaps the kitchen hasn't been tidied up for the third kind of night in a row. And yeah, these things can be really super, super frustrating. And you tell yourself, or you ruminate, that you're actually annoyed about the dishes, but what you're actually feeling underneath all of that is on your own, perhaps feeling unsupported, maybe feeling unseen because actually you feel absolutely exhausted, and maybe you feel like you're carrying everything on your own. So we're looking at what is underneath what we think the problem is. So in this instance, the untidy kitchen isn't the issue. The lack of text message isn't the issue. The feedback isn't the issue either. These are simply doorways into something much older that will continue to create sensitivity until it's resolved in your system. So when we have the courage to go beneath the surface, so to peel away this illusionary layer that we think is the problem and actually look at what is going on underneath the surface and heal the root cause, rather than constantly trying to manage the symptoms, which is absolutely exhausting, that's when everything starts to change. That's when our life starts to change. That's when our relationship starts to change. I mean, everything starts to change. And this is partly one of the biggest reasons that I wrote my book, The Only Way Out Is In, Healing the Hidden Patterns Running Your Life. The whole book is about helping you to recognize reoccurring struggles in your life and that they are rarely random. They are often invitations to something that's been running beneath your awareness for years and years and years before you can even remember, potentially, for some people. So rather than simply helping you to cope with life's challenges, it teaches you how to uncover the hidden programs, the hidden beliefs, the hidden survival strategies that keep recreating those challenges in the first place. So with that said, let's jump into today's question. So, hi Salarah, I feel like I'm stuck in the same relationship pattern over and over again. And I have to say, I know how awful that feels, because that's something that I've said many times too. And I hear lots of my clients saying the same thing. Whenever my partner gets upset with me, I immediately feel misunderstood. I find myself explaining what I meant, sometimes over-explaining. I find myself defending myself or trying to make things better, but somehow it always just seems to make things worse. I have to say, I absolutely feel you there. There's nothing more frustrating than feeling like you're doing the right thing and it's just digging a deeper hole. This person goes on to say, the frustrating part is that I genuinely don't believe that I'm trying to hurt my partner. I'm actually trying to help. I'm trying to fix things. Yet she tells me that she just feels dismissed and unheard. And I'm exhausted because I feel like I'm giving everything that I've got, but it is never enough. How do I stop repeating this cycle? I have to say, first of all, just the fact that you're asking how I stop repeating the cycle is probably one of the biggest transformations that you can make. That creates a door. Until you ask that question, until you have awareness that there's an issue in the first place, there's no door for you to walk through. So I just want to say that that is massive in itself, that awareness. And of course, thank you for writing in, because no doubt there'll be many listeners listening to this that will absolutely resonate with this question and the frustration that you're experiencing. So for those listeners that are listening today thinking, oh goodness, like, yeah, this sounds like me. It sounds like my relationship, then you're far from alone. I believe relationships are our biggest initiation into our deepest healing if we can see them as a mirror and as an opportunity to heal and grow on deeper levels. But sometimes it's quite tricky not to get lost in the illusion of what we think is the problem. So this pattern is incredibly common. And one of the biggest misconceptions people have is believing that the problem is the argument. So a bit like I said before, because it rarely is, the argument is simply a symptom. And the deeper work begins when we're willing to ask ourselves different types of questions. Not how do I stop arguing, not how can I get my partner to do what I need them to do, but what is this argument pointing me towards inside myself? That's when you're going to start to notice that you make big leaps forward. So whenever we find ourselves caught in these repetitious cycles, something much deeper is actually asking to be seen. And very often we're trying to solve today's problem with yesterday's survival strategies. And if you haven't had a chance to read my book, I think you'll find the first part, which is about survival living, very interesting. You may have been in survival mode without realizing that you're in survival mode. So this leads me to asking you something. When somebody becomes upset with you, what actually happens inside your nervous system? Do you immediately tense up and feel defensive? Like, do you feel like you're being criticized? Do you feel like you're a failure, that you're being misunderstood? Do you feel like you have been rejected, that you're not enough? Because if that's what's happening, your body isn't only responding to this present moment, it's responding to something much older. I know I've said that in a couple of different ways so far, but it's really important to get that message across, that it's not what is happening in present moment, which is the real issue. It's where this was born and birthed, which is the real issue. Everything else is just symptoms of things that are unresolved. So most of us, we're not even really reacting to our partner. We're reacting to the meaning that we have unconsciously attached to what is happening. This is what I've mentioned in previous episodes called meaning making. Perhaps somewhere along the line, you learned that making mistakes wasn't safe, or that conflict meant that love might be taken away from you. It might disappear, or that being misunderstood meant that there was something wrong with you, meant that you weren't acceptable, meant that you weren't lovable. And without even realizing it, those old beliefs become the lens in which you experience not only your relationships, but the whole of your world. Because we look at the world through the lens of our emotional state. So for those of you who have already done loads of work and you've already noticed loads of improvements, that's amazing. Congratulations, because you are changing the lens in which you're viewing the world through. If there are still a few things that feel unresolved, it just means you're ready to go a little bit deeper so that you can experience more good in your life. So let's now go to imagine your partner saying something like, can we have a chat? Now, for one person, that's simply going to be like, oh yeah, that would be great. It's going to be this lovely opportunity to connect. But for another person, that could create a whole host of emotional responses, especially if that person's carrying an old wound. Those 5 words can immediately translate into, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. I'm scared. I've done something wrong. They're going to leave me. The words are exactly the same for both people. They experience those words completely differently, though, depend on their emotional terrain. That's why healing isn't just about changing what happens around us. It's about changing what happens inside of us to change the lens that we view the world through. And one of the biggest shifts I see people make is when they stop asking, well, who's right in this situation? And start asking, what part of me has been activated in this situation? And they're 2 completely different questions. One's going to keep you stuck in the loop, in this kind of egoic battle. Another one is actually going to help you move forward into healthier relationships. Of course, they're completely different questions. So when we're desperately trying to explain ourselves, and we over explain when we try and defend our intentions. But I didn't mean for it to come across like that, in which case when we do that, we completely dismiss a person's experience. Or if we're actually trying to convince someone that we're a good person, we say, well, you're trying to tell me I'm a bad person. I'm a good person. I do all X, Y, and Z. And that's the kind of defensiveness. We're often trying to escape something very uncomfortable that is happening inside of ourselves by doing that. And we genuinely do believe that if they finally understood us, that then we would be okay. How disempowering is that? So our okayness, our safety, our value, and our worth is determined by what somebody else thinks of us. Emotional safety, it doesn't come from convincing somebody else. It comes from learning to come back to ourselves time and time again, understanding that everybody has their own activations. Everybody has their own emotional wounds and triggers. And we might very well be looking for something in somebody that they haven't even got it themselves, let alone be able to give to us. And the truth of all of this is that we are already worthy. We are already enough. And we don't actually need external validation from anybody outside of ourselves to prove something that is already a fact. So why do we do it? We end up creating a problem that A, doesn't need to be there, and we feed something. So we keep ourselves locked in a pattern that no matter how much we people please, no matter how much we abandon ourselves trying to rescue somebody else, it's a thirst that we can never, ever quench. I know this firsthand. I tried that for so many years. My self-worth and my self-esteem was massively impacted by what other people thought of me. I would constantly try to help somebody have a better emotional experience, even to the detriment of my own happiness, because I needed external validation. And when I started to grasp this and realize that actually I am already all of those things that I am looking for, and the places that I'm looking for those things don't actually have it to give to me. Therefore, I'm kind of overworking for little return, if you like. And in the meantime, abandoning myself over and over again, as I say, doesn't actually bring me any relief. All it continues to reinforce is that I'm not enough and that I'm not worthy, which isn't true and it isn't fact. As Peter Crone would say, it's a lie. We are believing a lie. Another pattern that I noticed in some of my clients is, and also in relation to this question actually, is the rescuing side of things. I spent pretty much my whole life trying to rescue somebody else, believing that if I stopped their pain, if I offered solutions, if I helped to solve their problems, then they would feel better. And of course, the intention is always coming from a loving place, but sometimes helping isn't what the other person needs. They have to go through their own process. They need to find the skills and the mindset and the inner strength to overcome their own challenges. And sometimes all they need is to feel heard and supported and understood whilst they're going through their own process. I wonder if the rescuing thing is actually trying to ease our discomfort watching somebody else going through discomfort. And if we stop their discomfort, in actual fact, it's going to stop our discomfort. So we think we're giving, but actually what we're trying to do is take something from them in order to make ourselves feel better about ourselves. It's a big topic. It's going to take a lot to get your head around. Any more questions on this, please feel free to reach out to Salarah@salarahstarre.com. It's something I did for years and years and years. I hated seeing other people suffer. In fact, I still don't like it. But I know it was only through my own suffering that I was able to heal. You hear the saying, like, no pain, no gain. I had to be squished and squeezed and pushed in some of my patterns to my absolute limits until I finally made the breakthrough. And it wasn't by anybody helping me. It was by me helping myself with the support of those around me, rooting for me, believing in me, and seeing me overcome the challenges. And there's a big difference in that. So imagine that you've had a really challenging day at work. I think for many of us, it's actually quite easy to imagine that because we've all had that at some point. And you come home and you say something like, oh my goodness, I've had a really challenging day. I feel so overwhelmed. And if the other person immediately replies, well, why don't you do this? Or have you thought that? Or maybe you could make a list, and starts going into like this solution strategy. What they're actually trying to do is solve your discomfort, or perhaps they're trying to solve their discomfort by solving your discomfort, because seeing you uncomfortable is making them uncomfortable. But what your heart actually needs and is longing for, and I see this so much in all kinds of relationships, is just to feel heard and seen. And you know what, my love, that sounds really difficult. I'm sorry that you had such a challenging day. Why don't you sit down and make you a cup of tea, or come here, tell me all about it, offload. No solution, no practicalities, nothing. Just holding space. And 9 times out of 10, that's all that's required. That person now feels a lot better and they can carry on. And we all need that. One strategy creates a solution, but also disconnection if the person hasn't asked for the solution. And the other creates beautiful connection. It creates a feeling of safety. And there's a huge difference between holding space for somebody's discomfort and then trying to remove it. Like I said, one creates connection. The other, although well-intentioned, it actually can create distance. And there's something that actually stood out to me in this question that we received from this listener, my client. I'm giving everything that I've got. And as I read that, I've heard that quite a few times, but it did make me wonder, have you spent much of your life believing that love has to be earned? That your value and that your worth comes from what you do rather than who you are? And because I see this so often, like people become incredibly generous, over generous with their time, over generous with their energy, with their money, with emotional labor. I know I was one of them. Not necessarily because giving is who they are, but because somewhere deep inside, they've learned that being useful keeps them safe. And I think that's important for me to repeat that, because somewhere deep inside, they learned that being useful in some way keeps them safe. And that's what many people have just been searching for, is that feeling of belonging, feeling of safety. That fear of abandonment and rejection drives so much of our behavior. But of course, we just reinforce it with the behavior. We keep ourselves locked in this loop. So maybe you're the one that always organizes family birthdays, secretively resents that nobody else does the same for you. Maybe you're the one in the family that sends the message and checks in on everybody. Maybe there is resentment because nobody is checking in on you. Maybe you're the one picking up the shopping. Maybe you're the one feeling drained because you're solving everybody's problems, being this strong one, whilst all of those things are really beautiful. You ask yourself this: if I stopped doing all of those things tomorrow, would you still believe that you were worthy of love? Would you still believe that you were worthy of enoughness? Because many of our behaviors are driven by that. It's not to say that we can't be in community and help each other. I genuinely believe that we are here to all help each other and make each other's lives easier. But there's a different energy. One is coming from a wounded place where we are, mostly unbeknown to us, seeking to receive something from for ourselves. And another is just coming from a place of wholeness, purely just to give. And you know that when you've reached that place of wholeness, because there's no frustration or resentment attached to it, the energy of giving feels very, very clean. So quite often, if there is resentment or frustration, it's because the energy that we are giving on is somehow seeking something for ourselves in the process. And that's when things start to get contaminated. And that's when relationships become a lot more challenging. And this is where a lot of these hidden patterns start to reveal themselves. Myself and my friend are currently working on a 7-step program, which is specifically designed for people who notice reoccurring patterns of resentment, who have suffered from betrayal or abandonment issues or rejection wounds. And this 7-step process is absolutely designed to give a complete turnaround from a disempowered state to a more empowered state, to feel much more in control and much more confident without living life in this constant fear and frustration. If that's something that resonates with you, then email me, salarah@salarahstar.com. It's an intense process, not for the faint-hearted. So it's not something that is just easily bookable online. Would need to have a call just to make sure that you're a good fit. But if this is something that is speaking to you and you're really ready to change these patterns, then do reach out. It'd be lovely to hear from you. So let's look at it through the lens of actually this overgiving that I've been doing for all this time. It isn't actually generosity. It's lack of self-worth and self-esteem disguised as generosity. It's a self-protection mechanism. It's a strategy. It's a way of avoiding the discomfort of simply believing that I am already enough. So the idea is to not stop giving. The idea is to not stop connecting. It's the energy that we're giving and we are connecting on, which is what creates so many of the issues we experience in our relationships. And as we begin healing, we realize that intimacy definitely is not created by rescuing one another. It's created when two people are willing to meet each other in vulnerability, in honesty, taking personal responsibility for the lens in which they are viewing the relationship through, for their resentments, for their triggers, doing the healing work on that so they can come into the relationship more whole. Because so many of us are just pointing the finger and just blaming one another. And responsibility and personal accountability is not about blaming the other person. So many times that we hear the words like, well, just take responsibility for yourself. And of course, immediately we think we're being told that everything is our fault. It's not. It doesn't mean that everything's on us. We all are playing a part in what we are experiencing. Taking personal responsibility, it just simply means becoming curious about your side of the pattern. What is it that I'm bringing into this toxic pattern? How is it that I am responding in this toxic pattern? Am I reacting from a wound that I've been carrying for a long time? Or am I responding from the present conscious person that I am becoming? And there's so many different exercises that we can do around this. I think one really useful one is looking at who we are beyond this personal challenge. So say, for example, one of my biggest challenges was rescuing and looking for solutions and trying to take people out of their pain. I was actually taking a gift away from them because I realized that only through pain have I grown. So I was delaying them and their empowerment and their growth. So who do I want to become beyond that? I would like to still have this empathy and this love, but also to understand that people have their own processes and actually they grow through their processes just like I do. And I can have empathy and compassion for them and hold space for them, but no longer rescuing them to try and stop my discomfort of seeing the pain that they are experiencing. So who am I becoming beyond that? I'm becoming somebody who can sit with the discomfort of experiencing someone else in pain, hold space for them whilst they figure it out, and believe in a higher vision of them that they can absolutely figure this out. And instead of injecting and disempowering them by trying to rescue them, I can feed positive thoughts into their energy field. Like, you've got this. You can handle this. I can see you overcoming this, and help build them up through that. So after this episode, I'd really like you to start noticing what your patterns are. And this isn't about trying to change your patterns. First of all, it's just about having awareness around them and not judging them. Like for me, it was like, oh, there it is. Whoop, there it is. It was like that rap song. I just found myself noticing these patterns everywhere. And actually, at one point, I felt quite sad because I was like, I have felt so disempowered, lacked worthiness and lacked self-esteem and enoughness. And I have been looking for it in everyone and everything, like mass trying to rescue everybody. But actually, maybe I was secretively crying out that I needed to be rescued, but by myself. So this is just about becoming aware. We can't change something that we're not conscious of. So awareness is the door to change. The next time you notice yourself in one of your patterns, whether it's rushing to explain something, whether it's overgiving, people pleasing, which is the same as overgiving, rescuing, which I guess is similar. It all kind of comes under the bracket of people pleasing in a way, or avoiding conflict, shutting down, not speaking your truth, trying desperately to make someone try and understand you, which has been a big challenge of mine. I just want you to pause and just notice, here's the pattern. You can take that line from that song. I don't even know who sings that song. Is it a rap song? Whoop, there it is. And you go, whoop, there. I was just doing that constantly. So instead of asking yourself, how do I stop doing this? You just ask yourself, what need am I trying to meet within myself by behaving in this certain way? And you'll notice just by intercepting it with these different thoughts that things will start to change for you, because that's a very different question you're asking. You're no longer feeding the issue. You're intercepting it, and you are injecting change just by asking something different. Like every single behavior that we have, it is meeting some kind of emotional need. And even the behaviors that keep us stuck, they're all trying to meet an emotional need. So perhaps you're overgiving because somewhere deep down, it helps you to feel like you're a good person. It helps you to feel like you are loved and worthy. Perhaps you're constantly fixing other people's problems because it makes you feel good about yourself. It makes you feel needed. So can you see that actually the energy of us giving on, it's not this pure energy. We're actually looking for something for ourselves within it. It's more of a self-seeking energy. Perhaps you're always explaining yourself because you're hoping that somebody will finally understand you. And if they understand you, perhaps you'll feel accepted. It never works. I've tried that. And in actual fact, most of my life, I've actually felt misunderstood. And I had a bit of an epiphany the other day. I realized that actually, if most of my life I've actually felt so misunderstood, I'm actually quite good at being misunderstood. And you know what? If I'm not going to spend my life explaining myself. If they misunderstand me, there's nothing that I can do about that because I know my heart. I understand me, and that's all I need. So I no longer need to look outside myself to validate myself. And remember, people are looking at us through the lens of their own triggers. So it doesn't matter how you try and get them to understand you. If they have unresolved triggers within themselves, they're never going to. So sometimes part of the challenge is learning to become comfortable with being misunderstood. So remember, the fascinating part about people pleasing is many people believe that they're giving. And this is the challenging part. Quite often they are taking, not in a selfish way, but like a deeply unconscious way. just as I've explained this whole episode. They're giving their time, their energy, and their attention or their love in the hope of receiving something back. Whether it's approval or acceptance, validation, significance, understanding, love, safety, worth. And of course, there's no judgment in that. We're all doing the best that we can. The fact that you're listening to this and you've even got this far into this episode tells me that you're ready to change that. And that's big, because this is actually where a lot of the real deep spiritual work actually happens. So I just want to say congratulations for making it to this point. If you feel that any of this information has been helpful to you or would be helpful to any of your friends, just share this episode as far and wide as you can. The more of us that become aware of these patterns, the healthier not only our lives will be, but this world will be at the same time. I could go on and on about this whole subject, but I'm going to leave it on this. What if your worth isn't something another person can actually give you? What if you are already worthy before anybody even approves of you? You already are that of which you are searching for. What if you already mattered? What if you are already enough? Now let's just imagine for one moment that that is true, which it is, but I want you to just take yourself into imagining that that is true if it's something that you haven't really tapped into until now. So just imagine that's true. Imagine you believe you're enough, that you already matter. How would you show up differently in your relationship? Would you find it easier to hold space for your partner when they've had a bad day? Would you find it easier to communicate about the dishes in the kitchen? How would you be different, and how would you show up differently? Would you still abandon your own needs to keep everybody else comfortable? Now remember, this is not about stopping giving. I really want to make this clear. This is changing the energy that we are giving on. So it takes us away from self-seeking energy into giving to a person from the fullness and the wholeness of our being. And that's what creates beautiful, whole, connected relationships. So this isn't just about understanding yourself. It's a bit like my book. I said it's not about understanding yourself. It's finding practical ways to help you uncover unconscious beliefs and patterns that have subtly been running your life for a very, very long time. Especially if you've asked yourself before, why do I keep doing this? Why does this keep happening to me? Then I definitely think the only way out is in book is for you. I'll leave a link in the show notes. If you think anybody else could benefit from that, then maybe buy them a gift. Let's spread this information as far and wide as we can. Anyway, in the meantime, it's been beautiful to be back with you. I love sharing this wisdom. Anything I go through, anything my clients go through that I believe will make a difference for you, I will always share. And in the meantime, I hope you have the most beautiful rest of the week, and I will be back with you the same time next week. Anyway, take care. Bye for now. Thank you for tuning in to the Salarah Starre podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit subscribe so that you never miss out. And you can stay connected with me on Instagram at Salarah Starre. And for even more inspiration and explore my courses and coaching at salarahstarre.com. You deserve to live a deeply connected and fulfilling life. And it's only you that can make it happen.